Hello, welcome back to a effects tutorial. My name is Playgue, and today we are talking about guitar to bass. Yes, one of the most used effects on the device, despite only having one parameter. It is pretty useful. The guitar to bass is available on Input Effects to Track Effects A only. It cannot be paired with granular delay and tape echo because of latency reasons, but it can when you apply it as a track effects. This effect is designed to turn your guitar into a bass guitar. Beatboxers have commandeered this into being the most powerful tool to make heavy bass lines. It doesn't take the record for the heaviest bass line maker. That award will go into a different effect, but it is the easiest way to make a bass line. Let's talk about the massive number of parameters that the guitar to bass has. Oh my, that's it, huh? Yep, just one parameter, which is controlled by the knob here, and that is balance. All this is how much the effect you hear versus your input signal. Some good balances to try are 80-20. It's really good for vocals to add along if you're going to continue to sing. Ooh, 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 yeah. Another one is to do 50-50. 50-50 is another decent balance. And the very, very famous and popular 0-100, just all bass and nothing else. How is this different from other basses? Well, we have other effects that can do bass lines, like the transpose. If we have the transpose at -12, the guitar to bass brings your voice down one octave. Well, the transpose also does that. But you can hear it's different. Pitch bend, also same thing. That sounds a little weird. Guitar to bass uses a different formula, a different algorithm to reduce the sound. It also boosts the bass a lot more. This is different from the octave too, because the octave allows you to have your original voice in there as well, but the octave you can't control the balance for. You can kind of control the balance by the octave level, but that is just controlling the volume of the effect. Because my original voice is still in here and can still be heard, versus the guitar to bass will completely delete your original voice. Cool. With the guitar to bass, you also want to watch your volumes, because this will make your house shake depending on how your volume is. And that includes your input level. So I've had my input level high here. Not very good for a guitar to bass. I should have it like around here, but then you can't hear me as well. Or your EQ. You would have your EQ set lower. Mine at +4 is usually what I use for most of my stuff anyways. But with the guitar to bass, I actually turn my EQ off. This sounds a lot better compared to if I have an EQ on, as far as volumes go anyways. And then the other is the actual balance itself. The higher you have the balance, the more powerful that sub is. All right, so let's talk about basic uses for the guitar to bass. Basic use: turn the knob to the far right here, and you hum. That's basically it. So we have it here, the mic grip for it. So when you hold the microphone, you are actually not just going to hold it under your nose, you're going to do a cup like this. And that is going to encapsulate the sound, so then it is a lot more powerful. So then you don't have to use an EQ and other stuff with it. And it'll really encompass the bass sound that you're doing. Because usually we are trying to get notes that are in the 0, 1, and at its highest, usually 2 octave range. We're not doing notes like we are doing notes like in the guitar to bass, which is already hard enough for the microphones to pick up, but it is even less so for the guitar to bass to pick up. But we'll talk about doing lower notes in a bit. So what we do is we change that grip. So I'm going to do it with regular grip, and then I'm going to change to that cup grip that I showed you. It's a lot more powerful when you do that cupped grip. Typically, you do not need an EQ with this, which is fantastic. Compared to other effects, it's not usually paired up with other stuff because then it sounds it doesn't work very well with a lot of other effects. Unless you're doing something super basic like a slicer, you don't really need any other effects except maybe a filter, which we'll talk about in a second. But you don't need other effects on here because it'll actually sound more muddy. Let's talk about other effects you can add. So if you want a cleaner bass, you can add a filter to it instead. Now let's talk about this. So this is a trick I learned from Freedon. Freedon uses a filter with the guitar to bass to allow it to be a lot more clean. And the filter, I have it as my default, I use it so often, is a low pass filter with a rate of 0, a depth of 0, a resonance of 50, a cutoff of 15, and a step rate of off. If you want more of your voice to come through or to be a little bit higher, you want to put it on the cutoff at 20. If you want it to be a little bit lower, you can put the cutoff at 10. And you'll notice that this allows you to have a much cleaner bass line. So one thing you might have noticed is that the bass line stopped being as powerful after a certain point. For me, and this is going to depend on your vocals and your vocal skill level, is if you go at a low enough note, especially if you're doing like subharmonics and like that, which for the guitar to bass, you don't want to do subharmonics with. But if you can get low, at that pitch level, the guitar to bass will just stop being effective and it'll stop actually producing a heavy bass part. If you can get really low, you may need an EQ to boost your low. So when I'm doing blindfold, for example, track 5, I am actually putting an EQ on my last note of +7 on the lows, +5 on the low mids, and nothing else. Because you're just trying to boost that low end. Because it's still registering, it's still able to make a sound, but it's not being punchy enough when you're on the lower end. So I turn this EQ on for that last note. So I'll show you what that sounds like if I don't do anything. So it's all right, but the punchiness kind of dips off. But if I wanted to have that punchiness again, I just turn that EQ on for just that low note because that note is low enough that I need it. So for lower bass notes, you may need an EQ to turn that on to allow it to actually show up. You can also turn your voice into a bass guitar too. So if you want to turn your voice to bass, all you have to do is turn on a guitar to bass, have it at one of those lower values I talked about, like that 80-20 is pretty good. You can even have it a little bit lower if you wanted to, or the 50-50. And you can turn your voice into a bass guitar. All right, here we go. And Turn on the octave. All right, I have way too much fun. Bass lines are just so much fun. Holy crap. Yeah, I'll talk about how to do all that stuff at the end. So sometimes layering the bass helps cut it through the mix. So in Gift, for example, I actually layer 3 guitar to basses on top of itself. So for this, what I do is I just do my normal voice, and then I turn on the guitar to bass, which is at 50-50. And then from here, I put it at 9 o'clock, which puts it at like 85-15. And I layer those 3 on top of itself. And all together, that sounds like this. There we go. So you hear it cuts through a lot easier. So I mentioned not really being useful with other effects. It's also not useful when pairing up with other sounds too. So you can do all kinds of sounds in the microphone, but the guitar to bass really only works with consistent tones and hums. When doing things like lip oscillations, for example, the guitar to bass sounds bubbly and just wrong. So I'm going to do just a couple of lip oscillations, and you can hear how those sound. Things like that. So doing those into a guitar to bass are just gross. Another thing to note about things you can't really do with the guitar to bass is you can't really use a vinyl flick on a guitar to bass. Not that it's impossible, but it just reduces the tonality of the guitar to bass so much that it really doesn't exist anymore or is not nearly as powerful. All right, so we got that. Yeah, you hear that popping? You can't really use a vinyl flick with a guitar to bass, unfortunately, because it has all those artifacts in it. But let's talk about things that you can do with a guitar to bass. So some things you can do is an 808 slide at the end of bass lines. Like at the last part of that Looper 2.0, we add a little bit of an 808 slide at the end. So you hear it there. All I'm doing in the microphone is just going, Another thing that the guitar to bass is good for is just adding a little extra piece of bass in there. So like the really wild track with Amber. Right there. And throughout the whole piece, it actually ends up sounding pretty decent. Another cool trick with the guitar to bass is, and this is just bass in general, someone asked, how does Leonard make his tracks sound so bouncy? And there's a lot of different techniques that Leonard does besides just being a talented god at music, especially house. But he and others use a technique called offsetting the bass. So we have the kick on a track. So I'll just do a quick example right now. So we have like a mid kick right here. And if we put on a guitar to bass, I will do 2 different examples. One is I will put it under the kick, which is the example that you hear in the demo track. As you can hear, that makes the kick a lot more powerful, which is great. You want that punchiness. But let's hear what it sounds like if I offset the bass. Do you feel how much more bouncy that is? Okay, so you can hear the bass. It's pretty good. But if I offset it with a beat shift, so this is going to shift these by just an eighth note, that's going to offset it and put it on the offbeat for the kick. And you can hear how much more bouncy that feels, which is pretty fun. All right, next tip. I have been using it as an input effect this entire time, but we can also use it as a track effect, which for some reason has been on this whole time. This will allow your sound to come through without the bass muddying the mix or the track as a whole. So like with bouncing, we have all this, but when we add a 8812 to this, we get that sound actually coming through still. And then if we add the other effects, because again, this is on top, so that's the thing that's being hit first as it travels through the other effects. It still preserves that bassy sound. We'd move with A, we do the same exact thing. We have a guitar to bass at 80-20 here. It really adds that underlying bass sound to the guitar that we have going on here. And that is it. That is the guitar to bass and other ways to make bass lines. I hope you enjoyed this. And let's watch a example of different basic ways to use a guitar to bass. I'm ready to have fun. Alright. Hands in the air, now clap. Yeah. Hands in the air, now clap. Everybody put your hands in the air, now clap. Yeah. Hands in the air, now clap. Everybody put your hands in the air, now clap. Yeah. Hands in the air, now clap. Everybody put your hands in the air, now clap. Yeah. Body like. One, two, three, four. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Everybody jump!